interrupt this bass solo to take another quick look at the Aeneid, because I know we didn't really finish off with that. And we did have some discussion, which I just thought we would put into the context of the poem itself. We spoke about and by looking at the shield, really, we're summing up our discussion of the Aeneid, especially book 4. And we talked about in book 4 that Virgil represents two kinds of masculinity. There's the masculinity of Aeneas, who stays in Carthage and stays in Dido, his own world, his own kingdom. That really is himself in some way. And the Aeneas who is dedicated, Pius Aeneas, who is dedicated to his mission. And we see the way in which in the Aeneid, Aeneas either has no choice, or I think, as we discussed at the end of our last class on Virgil, that he chooses to have no choice. I think that's probably the best way of putting it, meaning he chooses his destiny. He chooses his destiny of Rome. I mean, we did raise the question, is there any way in the Greek and Roman world to avoid your destiny? Only in the Christian world will that, in the story that we're telling, will that become possible, this stepping out of destiny and embracing a kind of choice that's really not available in the same way in the Greco-Roman world, in the Greek and Roman world. So here we see the signature event in epic, that is the description of the shield. We'll see different shields at different works. Here Virgil is not only describing a shield, but of course signaling that he's writing in the same tradition of Homer. And this is not Vulcan, but Hephaestus, which of course you know is the same person. And here this is in book 8, and here Hephaestus, there the Lord of Fire, knowing the prophets, knowing the age to come. We have to see what's being translated as prophet. It's probably the Latin word vates, V-A-T-E-S, which is not the same word as navi in the Hebrew. There the Lord of Fire, knowing the prophets, knowing the age to come, had wrought the future story of Italy. If Homer is about place, Virgil is about time. The triumph of the Romans, it's not about time, it's about history. The triumph of the Romans, I'm gonna look at my book, the triumph of the Romans, there once found the generation of Ascanius heirs, the wars they fought, each one. Vulcan had made the mother wolf. We know this is the alternate story. Remus and Romulus, lying in Mars' green grotto, made the twin boys at play about her teats, nursing the mother without fear, while she bent round her smooth neck, fondling them in turn, and shaped their bodies with her tongue. We really haven't seen that much of that myth in Virgil, but we do get it here. And here's the next part of it. Nearby, Rome had been added by the artisan, and Sabine women roughly carried off out of the audience at the circus games. And I just look at my notes in the note. Well, it's really helpful to have it. So in my notes, well, first it has the Romulus and Remus bit. And then it says, a Sabine king. Because the new city of Rome consisted mostly of men, the Romans decided to steal women from the Sabines. The Romans invited them to an athletic festival, and at a given signal, every Roman carried off a Sabine bride. Cue the theme from Love Story, how romantic, right? So we wondered about the role of the feminine in the Aeneid. And in some sense, we might say it's kind of like a bidiavad, meaning the only reason the women function in the Aeneid is because they're necessary to the future history of Rome. That's it, right? And Crusus, the figure behind Aeneas, Ascanius, and Chryses in that picture that Dr. Feldman, or that Bernini sculpture that Dr. Feldman showed us on our night at the museum, Crusus is sometimes not pictured, sometimes she's kind of seen falling back into the background, because the feminine in Virgil really just doesn't make a difference. Now, Augustus, he sees himself on this shield. Let's see if we can find Augustus here. Augustus, no. Here's line 916. Augustus Caesar leading into battle Italians with both senators and people, household gods and great gods. We imagine Augustus, after a big meal, sitting back and having the Aeneid either read to him or or reading it, and he sees himself on the shield. So we understand the mythic function of the Aeneid and how it must have functioned for Augustus and his court. But that doesn't stop us from reading, as we said, the parts of the Aeneid that really undermine the project of empire. And we talked about the way in which sometimes texts mean more than one thing, depending upon who the readers are. And it continues, Italians with both senators and people, household gods and great gods. There he stood high on the stern, and from his blessed brow, twin flames gushed upward while his crest revealed his father's star, right? Anything more divine than that in the Roman world. Apart from him, Agrippa, favored by winds and gods, led ships in column, a towering figure wearing on his brows the coronet adorned with worship's beaks, highest distinction for command at sea. Then, and I wanted to get to this part as well, then came Antonius with barbaric wealth and diversity of arms, victorious from races of the Dawnlands and Red Sea, leading the power of the East, of Egypt, even of distant Bactria of the steppes. And in his wake, the Egyptian consort came so shamefully. And that is a depiction, as we said, of Mark Antony. But in Mark Antony, we find the Augustan alter ego. The Augustan alter ego is Mark Antony. And what does he do? He goes to the East. And not only to the East, he goes to Egypt and the feminine, the Egyptian consort, so shamefully. Later on, we'll see maybe later on, technology people, I'm looking for, I'll just read it for you. This is in the text, it's line 863. The Lord of Fire, again, that's Vulcan, and talking about Cleopatra, amid this, had portrayed her there, Cleopatra, amid the slaughter, pallid with death to come, pallid with death to come. So Cleopatra, it's not only that Mark Antony serves as a figure of the bad Aeneas, the Aeneas that Aeneas does not choose to be. That Aeneas would be the Aeneas who stays with Dido. Cleopatra is pallid, just like Dido is before she dies. And Virgil is telling us very clearly here, Virgil is telling us that in order to be Roman, you not only have to choose to be the right kind of man, you have to choose not the right kind of woman. That's the choice in the Odyssey. In the Odyssey, the choice is to choose the right kind of woman. Do you choose Calypso, or do you choose Penelope? And Odysseus chooses this world. He chooses Ithaca. He chooses Penelope. He chooses that place. Aeneas has a different choice. It's not a choice between different kinds of women. It's a choice between different kinds of manhood. The kind of manhood that will choose the feminine, or the kind of manhood that ignores the feminine. And Augustus's world is a world which really ignores the feminine. And we hear the resonance of the Sabine women who are raped and just taken up for the cause of Rome. They're not really there for any other purpose than for the procreation of the male and for the continuation of history. Just such a contrast between the two works, again, between different kinds of masculinity. The feminine is absent, and also very crucially for Aeneid, the Aeneid that is for Virgil, the choice of history and what that represents. In a fast forward that we'll see together, remind me of this, God willing, when we're all together in the same classroom next year, we'll see in Milton's Paradise Lost that in Milton's long midrash on Paradise Lost, Eve, like Narcissus, is sitting at a pool and looking at her own vision. She loves her own image, just as Adam loves her own image. She's also enamored of her own image, but Adam pulls her out of her own image and says, you have to be the mother of mankind. We need you. We need the feminine for history, which is an interesting Miltonic revision of Virgil. That is, Milton also writes about history and time. And most epics after Virgil, and every Christian epic, will really not be about space, but be about time. And for Milton, the feminine is included in ways that are not possible in Virgil. And she, the mother of mankind, becomes the source of the future. But that's going ahead of ourselves. In the Aeneid itself, there is no role for the feminine in history. Crucis, like we saw in that famous image of Aeneas and Chryses and Ascanius, Crucis gets left behind. The feminine gets left behind.